Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. If it's your first time joining us, thank you for being here, and everyone else, of course, welcome back. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. Please say hello in the chat and let us know where you're coming from. I'm Cecilia Cheverry, the Director of Operations and Outreach at Christina T. Miller Sustainable Jewelry Consulting. We provide strategy, guidance, and education on responsible sourcing and sustainability for the jewelry industry. And I'm here today with Christina and the birthday girl, Ana Braceitite, our Education Director. So if you'd like to find out more about our services and about us, please check out our website, christinatmiller.com. And let's start the living room. So the living room is an informal virtual hangout to support community and connection on issues related to responsible sourcing in jewelry. We cover different topics every month, and we love to hear from everyone. You can feel free to share feedback and topics you'd like to discuss with this form on our website that will be dropped in the chat. And thank you to everyone who has showed up to have this conversation. And thank those who have contributed as well with a pay what you want option or the subscription. We are really happy to be able to provide these sessions, and thank you so much for helping us make this possible. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We are recording. These videos, as you all know, are in the public realm. You're welcome to speak up, ask questions, or put them in the chat. But when you're not speaking, please stay muted. If you're private messaging, also always please keep it kind. The private chats should be respectful of participants' privacy and personal space. If you want to ask a question or have a comment you want to share, put it in the chat. And also, please subscribe to our email list to stay up to date with all the exciting things that we are doing. It will also be put in the chat, the subscription link. And just so you all know and put it in your calendars, our next living room is, as usual, on the third Friday of every month, in this case, September the 16th. And now I will hand it over to Ana.
Thank you, Cecilia. So real quick, before Christina introduces our guest for today, we actually have a very special and exciting announcement that everyone here at the living room will be the first to hear. So on September 7th, we are launching our first online course. This is going to be called Foundations for Sustainable Jewelry Practices. We're really excited to bring this to you all. It's an introductory level course that will lay the foundation for future courses we will be putting out, as well as serve as a really great on-ramp for anyone who would like to work with CMC utilizing our consulting services. So this course comprises 4 lessons that will help you understand the impacts that the jewelry industry has on people and planet. We discuss a little bit of jewelry industry history and how it ties into the status quo today. We talk about the terms that we use in our communication and our marketing. And we have a basic overview of the issues around specific jewelry materials. We wrap the course up with ways that you can take action and a short assessment. It will also include some downloadable resources, as well as a brand new feature, which is a community forum just for course takers, where you can discuss topics related to the course with other folks who are taking part, ask any questions, maybe even make some new friends. So we've been developing this course for some time now, and we're so excited to be launching it. We will also have a special early bird pricing offer for pre-orders for about 2 weeks before the course actually launches. So keep an eye out for a newsletter announcing that special offer. We'll drop the link again just to make sure you have it and you're subscribed. So yay. On to today's topic. I'll hand it over to Christina to introduce our guest.
Thanks, Ana. All very exciting. If you're not on our newsletter yet, on our email list yet, we really hope that you sign up so we can keep you updated about this online course and future content. So It is my great pleasure to introduce to you today Brandee Dallow. We are grateful to her for her preparation for this living room session today, for giving up a middle of her day on a Friday. It's actually really beautiful here on the East Coast. So thank you for everyone attending and for Brandee. Let me tell you a little bit about Brandee. She's an impact communication specialist who helps organizations uncover their reason for being beyond profits and grounded in humanity. She works hand in hand with clients to help them identify what differentiates their brand from their purpose in order to capture audience attention and ultimately loyalty over the long term. So this can help accelerate the commitments, the positive commitments that companies have in place with authenticity. So Brandee, I first learned about you from your work with independent jewelers. They were Jennifer Dawes and Alexandra Hart, right? And it was part of your work with Rio Tinto, big, giant, mining giant, on the Diamonds with a Story project. And this was something that you developed for Rio Tinto, really to help them find markets for the diverse quality of diamonds that were coming out of that mine. It's so the Argyle mine in Australia, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's since closed down because they exhausted the available diamonds in the large scale pit. But she'll share, a little bit more of her experience. She's also worked for De Beers, the Responsible Jewelry Council, SCS, various diamond manufacturers, diamond trading platforms, and jewelry retailers. And so we know you, the living room attendees, we know you well, and you might be wondering why we invited Brandee to be our featured guest, given her past focus on larger companies in our industry. And the short answer is that Brandee understands that effective communication about your commitments to very carefully considered sourcing choices, commitments to environmental protection, support for underrepresented communities in the mining sector and in our everyday lives, for social justice and more, are practices that audiences want to hear about. And she has some lessons to share with us. So take it away, Brandee.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I really, really appreciate it. I am thrilled to be here, and I thank all of you for joining, because I know that this is a kind of a different topic than we usually get into, but it is an important one, because unless we communicate and communicate properly, then we won't be able to get clients, customers, or people interested in what we're doing. And so communication is, in effect, one of the most important things you could do as part of your overall business. I also do want to say that, yes, I have worked for some major big companies. I think that, the beauty of working for those larger companies was getting to see the whole supply chain and really getting to understand all aspects of the business and how different designers, manufacturers, retailers, what roles they play in that supply chain. And so even though those were big mines, for example, ultimately the main consumer for those goods are either independent jewelers, designers like yourselves, or small businesses like yourselves, large retailers, etc. And so also part of communication, though, is really understanding who is your audience, and we'll talk about that. And each one is a little different. And so learning about each one was really, really terrific. So we'll begin now. And I just wanted to also state one other thing quickly. You will hear a few things over and over again. You will hear things that you probably have heard before. That's okay, at least in my humble opinion, because I think it's important to be reminded about some of the things that we are saying and doing, and maybe then give it a little think and perhaps change something that you may not have because you remembered something because we reminded you through this. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you get a lot out of it. So let's go to the next slide, please, for the first slide. Great. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but this is this month's Time magazine cover. Pretty crazy. How to do more good. And I put this in not only because it was so timely, But it can't be any clearer by a cover like this at such a reputable magazine that more and more businesses are into doing the right thing. And that thing is good, and good is being responsible. And this is evidenced by this major headline story. So you know what this also means, right? It means more competition is out there in the space, and that therefore more messaging out there. And all of this messaging, consumers, yours and others, must now weed through. So knowing all of this makes your communication that much more important to develop effectively. And so that's what we'll get into now. Next slide, please. So I've been a communication professional my whole life. I went to college for it, and then started out in PR and sort of crafting messages, et cetera. So I want to originally talk about, why do companies communicate in the first place before we get into the specifics of why communicate about sustainability. Because the importance of communication to your company's success really can't be overstated. Think of the way you communicate as your brand image and treat it with that level of strategy. Communications encompass every aspect of your business, from face-to-face communication or chats with your customers, to your website, to your marketing emails, even your trunk shows and special events. And then if you have them, to your employees. So there's communication everywhere. What are the main reasons why companies communicate? Number one, communication reinforces brand messaging. With every public or private communication, you give away information about your brand, whether you realize it or not. That's why it's important to establish a company policy, a written one, even if you're a one-person business. This policy should talk about, how do you want to talk to your customers? I ask you to ask yourself, is your company a friendly, upbeat, or relaxed kind of company? Or do you want a serious professional tone without a lot of chatter? No matter, the key is to know your customers and what they want. You want to know who they are, how they speak, and again, what they want. Because with customer knowledge in hand, you can develop an approach to communications that defines and reinforces your brand so that they'll remember it forever. This voice or brand persona should be consistent across every line of communication and every aspect of your business. Second reason why we communicate is because it builds customer relationships. So communication is key when it comes to this, and it also will ultimately benefit your business. Using positive language in emails and on phone calls is a good way to keep a customer pretty happy. And then they'll feel comfortable with you and want to do more business with you. Sending personal notes or offers to a prospect on their birthday or another significant date, of course, without attempting to sell them anything, is also a great way to build a solid client relationship and keep your customer content while doing business with you. Number three, communication boosts creativity and innovation. So giving your customers and your employees, if you have them, the freedom to express ideas without the fear of judgment, which is what I think we're communicating here, is really important when it comes to business communication. This way, creativity and innovation can develop, and good business ideas can become great ideas. Open communication is also crucial when it comes to creating new promotional sales, improving your products, analyzing your customer feedback, really important.
Did Brandee freeze a little bit? Oh no.
Let's
Oh,
go.
she comes right back. Yeah.
She dropped off completely, so
And the image is just frozen on my end. Technology. Oh,
Well,
I think she dropped off. Okay.
yeah, while we wait for Brandee to come back, if you all might start thinking about some of the questions, some of you have probably arrived to this living room session with ideas of what you wanted to hear or what you wanted to learn about in particular. So if you would take a minute and drop that into the chat, that will help us when we get to the question and answer session. We have some of our own, but you know why you showed up for this one in particular. And it might mean that you're trying to solve a particular challenge within your own business. Oh, she's calling. Hold on.
What else? We hope you all will tell everyone you know about our course and spread the word. I think it'll be a great way to bring new people into the movement. So
She's coming.
great.
Guys, any questions? We've got Brandee here with us. Ask all your marketing questions, communications, email stuff, ads, PR.
She'll be, I know Brandee will be right back. She just has to, something kicked her off. And so she just has to log in again. Doesn't seem like it's a connectivity issue. It's just something knocked her off. So some of the questions, maybe this will trigger some ideas, but one of the big questions we have, and we hope that Brandee's going to cover this a bit, is the fine line between greenwashing and telling your story. We also know that, you know, we have the power to impact psychology, right? Words have the power to make people imagine or think certain things. How do we back up the stories that we're telling with the kind of information that is reliable? So some of the examples that she has are of different companies. So maybe if greenwashing is one of the things you want to hear something about, let us know in the chat. If you were coming to hear something else, or, you know, particular strategies, you can let us know. We're just hanging on. She. Joins us.
Mm-hmm.
How do we spot it?
Yeah, Barbara, I think that's a great question. We'll see how much of that Brandee gets into in the presentation, and anything else we can expand on afterward. I think it's a big challenge trying to find that line between asking for proof and trusting and sussing out what's real.
Here she comes.
Here she comes. Okay, great.
Oh, Jelnar, great addition. Good, we'll come back to those.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes.
deep breath.
I do not know what happened. My computer just shut off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the time while I wasn't here.
We got you.
Go ahead, Brandee.
It's all good.
Okay. All right. So we were on, ready to go back, everybody?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, I moved rooms, so hopefully this will maybe help. I don't know. So we were talking about communication and how it helps with employee morale. So customers aren't only the beneficiaries of effective communications. Your employees can be as well. Excuse me. My computer's still loading. So 80% of the people who were recently surveyed in a small business survey, stated that the communication within their company and positive communication made them want to keep their job more than any other position that they had ever had. So open communication and language with your employees is incredibly critical to have a successful overall communication strategy. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to get you smaller so I could see my screen. Okay, so new slide, please. So why do companies communicate about sustainability? So there's nothing really new here than traditional communications, except that here in this kind of communication, your customers want to know more about what you are doing, what you are designing, what you are creating than they ever did before. And they not only want to know that you are a good corporate citizen, but they also, in greater numbers, want to know that also you demonstrate a measured effort to live more sustainably because they are living more sustainably themselves. Your customers need brands to supply choices that support the changes in their lifestyles. And a percentage of US retail consumers willing to spend more on products from socially and environmentally responsible brands increased across all generations. I know we talk about Gen Z and millennials, but it increased across all generations over the last 2 years. And this is according to a 2022 report from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Over the same time period, the premium they're willing to pay also has risen, particularly among Gen Z consumers. So no one, though, will know about your sustainability efforts unless you tell them. So we talked a little bit about employees, so I'm going to skip that, knowing that we just lost a little bit of time. And let's go into now the next slide, which is what is the difference between purpose-driven communications and traditional communications? Because for as long as business has existed, companies were made to sell stuff, right? Sell stuff to consumers. And there are endless articles and models and courses and degrees that focus on this one thing: how to sell and a company's bottom line. So it's no surprise today that one of the biggest challenges a business is having is talking about what you do versus the product itself. So traditional communications consist of what we call the 4 Ps: price, promotion, place, and product. And for goods that are much more sales goods like you would have, like jewelry, we talk about the 7 Ps: price, promotion, place, product, people, the physical, and the process. So this is more, the 7 are more for a service-based business, and the 4 sort of for a traditional business. But when it comes to sustainability communications, nothing's arbitrary. Nothing can be arbitrary or questioned. So actual evidence here is 100% a necessity. So here I have 5 different, questions or elements that I recommend you put every piece of your sustainability communications through to determine whether or not it's going to be successful. So first, your sustainability communications must be deliberate. Everything you communicate must be aligned to your brand purpose. So going back to the beginning when we talked about setting out that brand purchase and that strategy and writing it down, very critical to have that and go back to. I recommend that you focus on the topics your brand could be an expert on, and most importantly, provide added value for your audiences. It's important to note that providing quick commentary on a breaking news story or immediately sharing an article you come across can also be considered deliberate. And I'm not just suggesting that each piece of content needs a 1-hour brainstorming session to come up with what you're going to say, but just that they need to have that strategic reason for communicating and for existing. Your sustainability communications must be accessible. So what do I mean here? Well, thankfully, gone are the days of the jargon-laced articles and dense, stuffy, white kind of papers that we used to produce. Now, written communications needs to be presented in a way that everyone and anyone can easily read and understand. And this is regardless of their industry knowledge. This group here generally has a tremendous amount of information. And that is wonderful information, but we should focus on and think about the communications really relating more to how our customer is going to perceive and understand that information best. So the ultimate goal is to provide value, and the content must feel accessible to as many people as possible. Sustainability communications must be useful. So everything we communicate about sustainability should have a clear takeaway for your particular audience. When you're creating purposeful content, you must keep your customers in mind. The more useful and audience focused you can make your content, the more people will rely on it. And then they'll share it and they'll become more trusting of your brand. Sustainability communication stimulates further conversation unlike any other type of communication. So we also call it purposeful communication, if you've heard that term. And it should feel like an ongoing conversation with your community. You want to encourage people to hit reply with a question or a comment as you tell them about your business and what you're doing. You want to ask them if they'll shoot an email, shoot them an email. Maybe they want to talk further. Maybe they want to share your information, or you want to share with colleagues who might also be interested in this really important topic. So it's kind of like thinking that nothing has to stay in this one little area. Communicate to stimulate that conversation with your customers. Next slide, please. So I have this slide kind of to prove the difference here. I have two different examples from outside our industry and one inside our industry. And above all, this really proves that brands are changing their tunes fast. So Chipotle is a great example. I love it because we've also got their other alter ego here to compare them against, which is Taco Bell. Essentially, they both offer the same type of product, but go about it in a completely different way. So while Taco Bell's messaging, and I think you can see that sort of on the bottom, focuses solely on price, and that's the first message you get on their site. It says something about a $10 dinner box. Chipotle, on the other hand, is more focused on sustainability, transparency, and nutrition, which is all a part of this. So just take a look at their two menus. Chipotle literally has our values and nutritional information on the main menu, where Taco Bell's is literally nowhere to be found. So I'm not trying to demonate either the Taco Bell brand here. They definitely played a role in my life, probably yours during high school as well, but they're very strategic about their messaging. They connect through your wallet, which is very different than Chipotle. And this is much more of a proof of traditional communications. So they also are focusing on a transactional relationship, while Chipotle is really building this kind of tribe of loyal customers who stand what they stand for and demonstrate it by buying into their food. And you can see that by the lines actually outside the Chipotle's in Manhattan. So Chipotle is connecting on a deeper level that cuts across all social and economic lines. The next example I want to give is Sprite. And I don't know if you've read this, but I found it quite interesting that Coca-Cola Sprite's owner announced just a couple of weeks ago that they are, quote unquote, transitioning from green to clear plastic, even though green has been their identifying brand color, to increase the material's likelihood of being remade into new beverage bottles. So they said from August 1, Sprite will shift from the signature green color to clear PET packaging. So in addition to new clear bottles, Sprite is also introducing a new brand identity, including a fresh logo and packaging design. So basically what they're saying is we are now changing into a more sustainable brand. And here is one of the biggest efforts we can take. We are removing our traditional green, the one you know, just like that blue box, so that we can do our work towards making a better planet. And then the last one, of course, is that De Beers ad, right? So the original ad from the 40s, and then a retelling of it from the 90s. The idea that you can buy a diamond and you can make 2 months' salary last forever. Then I also have included what the change that they made, and you've all seen this. This comes in their Forever Mark series. which is directly named for the diamond is forever idea, but gives the consumer a completely different viewpoint of their business. Now they're talking about what they've done in the environment. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, what they've done for Botswana and the communities there and how they've helped them. Major change in that traditional communications of you have to have 2 months worth of money to buy our product. Really different feeling, as you can tell. I mean, starkly so. I'm not going to keep on this topic. You've seen it, you know it. So let's move to the next slide, which is, what do your customers want to hear from you? And I give this example here in this Fast Company slide. For as long as businesses have existed, companies were made to sell stuff to customers. And there are endless articles and models and courses and degrees, and I said this, that focus on this. So it's no surprise today that one of the biggest challenges for our business is talking about why they do something instead of what they do. Old world value propositions were driven by profits, as just proved, but in the age of transparency and authenticity, brands are forced to ask themselves the same existential question about what are we doing for our environment and our communities, and not just for ourselves. According to an October 2014 study by a communications firm that I really much respect, Cohn & Wolfe, the number one quality or behavior which people demand of brands is communicating honestly about products and services. Honesty. This is followed by, in their survey, not letting customers down and acting with integrity at all times. Very different than learning that you're going to get a deal or something about the product. Next slide, please. Gaining trust, of course, means acting with authenticity. And the last few years have been tough for so many of us. There's been a general acceptance as a result that it's restricted the way we've been able to do business and the way we operate. And there's nothing wrong as part of this honesty and authenticity in our communications with acknowledging how our businesses may have changed or may have been stretched or may have been affected by all of these interruptions. Far from showing corporate cracks, right now, honesty and openness is important to avoid disappointing your customers. So number one, in terms of being honest, we have to show integrity through our actions. And how do we do this? Well, the connection between your communications and actions, of course, as you know, has always been important. There's nothing more frustrating than being promised something like, for example, we'll be carbon or 100% carbon neutral in 2023, only to find out you took one step, or only for your consumers rather, to find out you took one step towards that gargantuan goal. There's nothing wrong with getting on the journey, assessing what you'll truly be in terms of your carbon footprint in weeks, if not months, and then make that public statement about what you're doing or what you're going to do. Also, be responsive, and I said this before. Communications is now a two-way street, that's for sure. And businesses are now more susceptible than ever to negative attacks. I think that really comes from social media and anyone kind of being able to say whatever they want. So this comes in public forums like social media, as I said, blogs, etc. And as we all know, we have tremendous challenges when it comes to the transparency and traceability of our supply chains, especially in gemstones and diamonds. We also have transparency or information out there, rather, about the way that we treat the people who mine our products, how the production of our products affect the environment, and so on. And let's not get into Russia. While it can sometimes lead to uncomfortable conversations, having the ability and place to respond in a timely manner and an open way will ultimately bear greater fruit than hoping negative noise is just going to die down, because it won't. Next slide, please. So here are some particular rules about communicating about sustainability. And then on the next slide, I'll get into even just a little bit more broad on the do's and don'ts. So the number one rule about good communications about sustainability is communicate truthfully and comprehensively. And this can't be repeated enough. So this is where I want to talk about sort of the specificity rather of what you all do, right? Meaning, are you working on a more traceable supply chain? Or are you working on tackling climate issues? Is your focus on ensuring you only use recycled metal or other recycled products? These are all different kinds of sustainability goals, and each one actually needs to be communicated in its own right. Perhaps you do it all. Perhaps you are trying to tackle everything. Great. But if the focus of your efforts is about one thing, even if it's just for this moment, don't claim that you're more than what you do. Look holistically and specifically at the same time. For example, if your ethos is to create jewelry with a limited environmental footprint, only communicate facts that demonstrate what actions you've taken towards that position. For example, if you've saved 300 tons of CO2, you must say how much CO2 you emit and explain what your plans are for the remainder of that CO2. So tell the story while being specific. I often get asked whether it's okay to communicate that a company is on a journey towards sustainability. And my answer is yes, as long as you take the time to tell honestly and specifically where you are on that journey, because the consumers care about that. And every step you take and every step you describe must be detailed and credible. Further to that, number 2 is measure and communicate hard numbers. So a few years ago, the New York Times did a global review of net zero pledges by corporations, in which half of them laid out no concrete plan for getting there. Those companies who continue to speak the ubiquitous language of commitment without measurement, targets, and progress updates place risks on themselves and on a public backlash. We're in the luxury business. It's the details that matter. We can't take a risk. Measuring and communicating actual baselines and targets, as well as progress, can be used as a strategy to steer clear of unsubstantiated claims. When controlling the operational effect and narrating progress, a set of solid measurements is crucial. So for example, even if you are a designer and you work out of a small studio, you probably have the ability to benchmark your energy use in some fashion. If you do that, then and only then should you inform your clients about your energy, your emissions, and your improvement measures. So perhaps consider saying something along the lines of, we've saved this premise's annual water use by 20% since 2001 by X, Y, and Z, by doing X, Y, and Z, to target our overall goals of X, Y, and Z. So that would be a good example without giving you exactly what you're doing. And so can the actual impact of your social initiatives be illustrated with statistics, keeping in mind to address less tangible sustainability criteria? Yes, they can. Number 3 is communicate in clear terms to avoid any misrepresentation. Use simple and straightforward language. Avoid ambiguous and misleading terms or expressions such as eco-friendly or green or environmentally friendly. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but know that these kinds of statements are open to interpretation and can lead to false expressions of sustainability. And I'll get into this a bit more later. But avoid using statements and images. So I know that I've seen out there serene landscapes and dewdrops and beautiful things in the green frogs and such, but they have very little to do with our particular product. Am I right? So let's not put things in that don't have to do with what the message is in our brand and the actual things that we are doing. And we've got plenty of beautiful and magnificent imagery. We don't have to take others. Number 4 is use established frameworks to back up your claims. So communicate about the sustainability initiatives that you can support with data, include documentation if you need to in your marketing communications, or at least refer to where a consumer can find them. Seek third-party assessments if you have the wherewithal to do it. And standards and certifications build trust, and this we'll talk about in greater detail in just a bit. Next slide, please. So simple do's and don'ts, and here is where I do want you to get your pencils ready. Do put your audience first. It sounds simplistic, but I've seen way too many brands think about what they want to say to the world before considering what your customers might want to hear from you. Different audience call for different messages, so understanding your audience will help maximize your ability to tailor your communications and therefore increase your engagement. So in the absence of real consumer data, which unfortunately we do have a lack of, tailor your communications so the audiences least familiar with the jargon in sustainability will understand. Writing too technically will increase your risk in killing your audience's interest. Remember, we've got a beautiful, emotional, fabulous product. We have to talk about that. And we have to figure out a way in communicating our sustainability messages in a similar fashion that our customers want to hear. Do analyze every word and ensure your language is specific to your actions. So look at your websites. Look at what you said 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. Is it still what you're doing? And is it still relevant to the audience and the consumers that you've built? So I've never been a real fan of the word ethics. Sorry, ethical metalsmiths. Love you guys, know you're here. It's me, not you. But ethics to me is just such a personal word, and everybody defines ethics, in their own way. So I also recommend staying away from this word if you can, because it can really be misinterpreted. My ethics may be very different than yours. You also may be tempted to use this word and other words like corporate social responsibility or ESG, environmental, social, governmental. And most companies oddly use these words interchangeably. So both these concepts are related, but each have their own definitive goals in communications and not in communications, but in goals and characteristics. And therefore, we really do need to think specifically about how to communicate about these things specifically. So let me just take a moment to give you clarity on these terms so that you can truly look at what you're doing and know going forward how to use communication and use each word in the appropriate way. So quickly, CSR, corporate social responsibility, covers the overall social, environmental, and economic concerns in your core policies, practices, and decision-making. They're generally self-regulated and can vary widely. And those CSRs about accountability, the qualitative, and I'll repeat this, qualitative nature of CSR makes it difficult to pin down. The will, values, and spirit of your company can be captured by CSR and in your communication, but it serves as a starting point to get this to the next step of that measurable data we talked about and that data-driven change. ESG uses environmental, social, and governance factors to evaluate sustainability. Different than CSR, ESG focuses on quantitative results. So ESG metrics have quantitative performance indicators aligned to particular ESG criteria. And Christina and her team can always get into this criteria more with you, as we don't have time with this in this presentation, and she's the expert. But by making these clear first in your business, then you'll be able to communicate each one clearly. And basically what you're hearing here is that CSR and ESG are related but not the same. So if you are going to implement these policies, CSR can be incorporated by communicating internally and in press releases that the company is committed to being more sustainable and responsible. But ESG builds on that foundation with measurable goals, such as a 30% increase in recycled materials without 5 years and planting 1 million trees in 10 years. So I recently, as I was preparing for this presentation, I read on this website called Lexology. While CSR aims to make a business accountable, ESG criteria makes such businesses' efforts measurable. Okay, so we'll move from that, hope you understand. And then lastly is don't use cliched language. Further to my statement a moment ago, we've reached a point of backlash against sustainability buzzword bingo. Many people feel that relying on these buzzwords and jargon is a strong indicator of a company simply jumping on the bandwagon and not actually knowing what they're doing and not actually doing. So there's still a lot of companies out there, as we know, that are greenwashing and trying to capitalize on this momentum. So be careful here. Companies not making an effort to translate this complex terminology that we often use into specific, meaningful information are the ones that are often used in not really understanding the subject. So we know that most of you do understand the subject. So now communicate about that subject in plain English. Explain why it's meaningful in a way to demonstrate your grasp of the subject. So it's okay to say, I don't know, or I'm looking into it. Point is, be honest, be clear, and make it understandable to the person that you're communicating with. I'm going to move on in a moment. I just want to make sure you may hear some stuff in the background. We do work from home. I now have a 16-year-old who is making himself lunch. So I apologize if there is any noise. The good news here is he does care about this topic. So, okay, so another tip I have here is even though I've used the term sustainability 1,000 times in this, I think not using the term sustainability over and over again when talking about this topic, it may seem bizarre and counterintuitive, but it actually makes sense. Why? Quite frankly, because the term sustainability has really just been overused, and people are using it even if they don't know the meaning. So you don't want to take those chances that you can be misperceived. Sustainability, I find, is probably the number one word these use that is used and abused like nobody else's business. So again, this to me is like the first sign of potential greenwashing. So let's not use it. It dilutes the meaning. And let's think about other words that we can use in our communication that are more specific. So instead of repeating the term sustainability, going back to what I've said, let's talk about the actions you are taking. Let's talk about what you do from start to finish and leave little to the imagination. Next slide, please. Right, so now that you have, kind of all these ideas about how to do it, let's give a little bit of a plan of what you want to put in your bag or your toolkit as you prepare to market and communicate or about your sustainability efforts. So I have 5 things I'd like to suggest. And the first goes back to the beginning of our conversation, which is a strategy for how you'll share your story. Define a comprehensive approach for sharing your story, ranging from the messaging that will express itself through your mission to your programs for practicing what you preach. And do it before you communicate, please. This process doesn't need to be complicated, but it's a necessity in order to keep your messaging consistent and on track. It starts with identifying your core attributes. Write them down. Write down your accomplishments, and then construct that message and put it on a platform that reflects your values so that strategy feels right for your specific company, as opposed to it feeling like a total left turn on what you do. Secondly, a clear mission statement. And I don't know how many of you have clear mission statements or have a mission statement. And it's super duper important. And I like to use it as sort of like that thing that I put on my windowsill, and I look at it every day to remind myself of who I am and what I want to be and what I'm doing. And a mission statement describes the basic goals of your business. So according to the SBA, the Small Business Association, a mission statement could even be 2 words or 2 sentences or a paragraph or even a single image. In most cases, your company has a single overarching mission statement. So it's just identifying it. You don't need to make a new corporate mission statement if you already have one. Take your normal or your mission statement that you already have, if you have it, and consider how that mission statement can be delivered through the sustainability lens. So that's the objective here in this new mission statement. A dedicated part of your website, and I'll give an example in a moment actually of a full website, but at least give your statement and describe your mission in a dedicated part. Make it easy for your clients to see it and understand it. And you need this home base to tell your story. It really is your calling card these days. And I just want to take a moment and show you something that I feel in all my research is probably one of the best websites ever in describing what their actions are. And it truly doesn't even matter what the company does. So if you don't mind, Anna, I'd like to show this website. It's called Avocado. And I can't see if it's up yet, so let me know.
I have it open. Do you see it?
Okay, great.
Mhm.
And you can even scroll through it if you don't mind. But to me, and we do have some wonderful ones in our industry, but to me, when I looked at this for the first time, I didn't even realize or really care necessarily that it was a mattress website, because everything on this website told me about the steps that they're taking within their business that align with my values and my morals and what I want, what I care about when purchasing a product these days. So can you do something like this on your website or in a particular part of your website? And what I also love about this website is it's visually appealing. And you do look at it, you see the mattresses, you see their product, but you have that feel of that this is a feel-good company that, you know what, I really want to do business with. And I think, it's just extraordinary. So after this presentation, if you want to take a look at it, I highly recommend that. So we can close that up and we'll go back into these points. And the next one is consistency on your narrative. So wherever you put your narrative, whether it's in advertising or in content development or social media, or going beyond your website, every single touch point, maybe it's even in your studio, where the purchasers will be of your jewelry or will encounter your brand, must feel, look, and speak the same language. So your brand has to be represented at every touch point. And then, of course, PR. PR is wonderful because it is not purchased. So a consumer, generally speaking, knows that it is something that you didn't buy from a company to tell your story about. So use PR to create stories and communications all year round. Tell the news media, who really do shape public conversation and perception about what you're doing. They love to hear this stuff. They are writing more and more about the efforts that companies are making, especially in this area. So, and I've noticed an increasing amount, of course, on jewelry, because there are so many questions about our business. So take an active position. Tell your story proactively. And yes, some companies are able to hire PR agencies to write their stories. It's not necessary. It's useful, but think about what you want to say and use some of the tactics that I put in here in order to get your story out. Okay. So last but not least in all of this, we're going to talk about standards and certification, and go to this next slide. And whether or not it's so-called toolkit worthy, like these other things that I talked about, because the fact is, a lot of companies go towards a standard, towards getting a certification, because it does give them this seal of approval, this logo that they can put down and say, oh, slap it on, here is what I did. So having worked for a standards and certification company for almost a year, and for working with the RJC, I'm going to just give you my personal humble opinions on these things. So, most of what we've preached loudest about in our industry, quite frankly, is that to truly prove your responsibility, you have to be certified. And I have some examples of those certifications in these logos that you're looking at. Right now, we have industry standards that are purely voluntary, like SCS or the butterfly mark. And we also have standards like the RJC's Code of Practice that, if I'm being honest, is more mandatory by a lot of businesses. So a lot of the retailers are now requiring businesses within if they want to do business with those companies, to be certified. Examples are Signet and De Beers, and back when we were doing business with Alrosa, they expressly stated to their customer base, their suppliers, that in order to do business with them, you need to be certified by the Code of Practices. And I'll kind of go into how you guys can even tackle this a little bit with smaller things in the next slide. RJC and these others are business-to-business certifications, by the way. They're not necessarily meant to be the way you can communicate to your customer. So what if you don't have the size business, and I mean, employee-wise or financially, to take on such large certifications? What if you're asked to look at parts of your supply chain that these certifications just simply don't apply to your business? And I can't see your responses, but I assume from many of you that I've learned in these sessions, this is a reality. So please don't get me wrong. I think the Code of Practices is extraordinary. And hence why when I was representing RGC in North America, I always said, go on their website, look at the Code of Practices. It's available to anyone and everything, and take pieces from it if you want. It's about looking at the document and what can you use from that document to make your business a better, more responsible business. It doesn't necessarily have to be all of it. All of it might be good for some. It doesn't mean it's good for all. The butterfly mark can also add value. What I like about the butterfly mark is they do this extensive publicity, so you can always capitalize on that, which is great. RJC is starting to do more of that now, and I believe we'll do more of that in the future. And then as far as fair mind and fair trade, fabulous. But however, going back to what I said before, have you asked yourself, is that at the core of your brand and the main and only communications you wish to convey? Is it just about responsible sourcing, or are you doing other things that you want to talk about? So just think about that. Think about what certifications match your business and therefore will match your communication strategy. And so I want to offer, next slide, just these other standards and certifications. They may or may not fit with your business, but they also can be added to your toolkit, and they could give the consumer a great idea of who you are and what you represent. And so here I have, SBA women's owned small businesses. And I actually did that for my own company. There's two types, there's WOSB and WeBank. And to qualify, your small business must be for profit and 51% owned and operated by women. I see a lot of women on this call. You can apply for both. And then you get this wonderful certification talking about that you are a women-owned business. That's something to be proud of. And that is part of sustainability. So talk about it. Another interesting option is if you are an LGBTQ plus business, talk about it. You probably have plenty of people who want to hear that. There's a certification called the Certified LGBT Business Enterprise. So of course, this is obviously if your ethos is about being a LGBTQIA plus business, but here's something that proves it and that you can absolutely use on your websites and in your communication. And finally, B Corp certification. And I was really thrilled to be able to learn more actually in this about B Corp. And again, even B Corp certification can be a little rigorous, but did you know that they actually have something called a pending B Corp certification? So I love this because it really allows you to start your responsible business practices and work towards your goals. It reminds me of that, bronze, silver, gold kind of idea. Start reaching for the gold in responsibility by starting with the bronze and then going to the silver and then reaching that level. And if Jenny Luker's on the call, I'll say even to the platinum level. So you do have to get B Corp certified within a specific amount of time as determined by B Corp, but it's a great way to talk about getting on that journey. And then, like I said before, proving it by something. So what I like about certifications is that they give your story added credibility and added value if they match with the overall story you're trying to tell. They provide the proof points we've been talking about today, but they are not the one and only thing. They are added value in your toolkit. And for most of these organizations, they do a ton of marketing. So it is a great place to align with what they are speaking to the public about and then sharing your stories in content. Co-branding, as we say. So why not co-brand with some of those initiatives? I guess overall is make a certification, make a standard, work for you and your business. Okay, so finally, and I think we're in good timing here, I just kind of want to end this all by saying that at the cross section of profit and purpose lives a successful business. And not only does communicating with purpose unleash your company's fullest potential, but it also deepens the relationship between you and your customers or your potential customers, which are always changing. So start by having conversations with different people about why your brand exists. Talk to partners and customers and friends and parents alike, whomever you trust the most, and think about why you are in business and ask them to help you determine how to better understand your business. How did they perceive your business? How did they want to be communicated with about your business? What really sticks out about what you do that they want to hear? This is the stuff you want to put into your messages consistently and therefore effectively. You want to make an impact on your customers with your company. And if you want to do that, you have to communicate about it first. So thank you. And I can't see the chat this time, but I do hope that this was useful and enjoyable at the same time. And I'm here now if you have any questions.
Excellent. We did get some feedback coming in. Thank you very much, Brandee. That was a thorough walkthrough of some of the important considerations to be making along the way. I'd like to share with you, and Anna, feel free to we'll do this together. One of the questions that came in while you were talking, in particular, I mean, you kind of addressed it, was about greenwashing. But I feel like in our industry in particular, because of how unclear our supply chains still remain to be, the ability to really get information about where our materials are coming from, or the impact that they're having at the source, or their greenhouse gas emission associations, or any of those things, we're still held back by the relative sort of obscure nature of our industry. So can you unpack a little bit about, like, I feel like for us, greenwashing is complicated because we, the initiatives that folks would like to celebrate in this community are sincere, are real, and they do lean on transparency in the industry, but sometimes folks aren't participating in some of these initiatives. So can you talk just a little bit, in your opinion, kind of how this industry is particularly challenged in the space of greenwashing, if you think so? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It's a very sort of difficult, loaded topic because it's obviously it's up to very specific businesses. And what I do think is we tend to communicate in two different ways within our industry. First, as each separate businesses, and then as an industry as a whole. And I'll just say the reason why we do that as an industry as a whole, because in my humble opinion, is because different than like the food we eat or the clothing that we put on our bodies, diamonds and gemstones, they're not going to cure cancer, they're not going to get COVID away, et cetera. And so we are protecting an image of a product that is essentially made up. I know we've worn jewelry since the dawn of time, and we all can tell these amazing stories about what jewelry means to us, but it's not going to necessarily save our lives or put clothing on our back. And so you do have a lot of these companies that consider the fact that if we don't market this product on a large scale and we don't make it look good, we won't have a product to be able to sell. And so I do think that that's where some of what you're saying in terms of greenwashing happens, because they are thinking about the overall message versus these specific actions that need to be taken, to make the businesses more responsible. I do hope that as more businesses become more responsible and understand the importance of communicating, those messages will rise to the top of the heap. And by the way, that also has to do with algorithms and stuff like that on our social media channels, et cetera. So the more communications we can put out there to communicate with the communications that would be considered greenwashing, I think, excuse me, the more greenwashing we'll put away. I think you're also asking about, if I may, sort of how do we stop it, right? Because it does happen in every business. And the answer is, I don't really know, except if we want to take on individual communications with our colleagues in this industry to let them know just how important it is that they don't do these things that we have seen on their websites or in their communications, that they are doing this and that there are other alternatives. Perhaps, there is a form of greenwashing that isn't even acknowledged, that isn't even known, because they don't know what the availability of information there might be. So there is no one police organization. I do think that we have an obligation to positively affect the amount of greenwashing in our business by saying something to those that we see are greenwashing, offering them help. You being on that road to responsibility, you have a lot of help you can offer them that will then benefit us all. And lastly, I'll just give a shout out to the Jewelers Vigilance Committee. Always check what statements are being made and whether or not they're even legal to be made by the FTC or other governing bodies. And I can't stress that the JVC is here and on top of those things, and they can be the ones who can take a little bit more action than any of us can on the greenwashing topic. I know that was sort of circular, but it's just a tough, it's tough without a quote unquote policing organization. And by the way, I got that question all the time. I'm sure, Ed, you did too with RJC. Like, why aren't you kicking people out? Well, the only way you can kick somebody out is if you get that proof, and that proof does take time.
Yeah, thank you, Brandee. I know that's a challenging question to answer, like you said, but I do like what you're saying about kind of calling people in. If there's a chance for that, I think some instances of greenwashing are just so egregious that we should be calling them out. But yeah, if we can call people in instead, that's
I think
a positive for all of us.
And Anna, just as I talked about this positivity, what we're all trying to do with our businesses are filled with such good energy, such good reasoning, and so that has to come across in our communication, even if we see so much greenwashing and we want to kind of shout at the top of our lungs, this company is bad. We have to think about both these things, that we do have our own businesses, and we can control only what we can control, and we can't protect everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we have a couple other really great questions that have come in, and the one I want to go to next is actually very similar to what I had written out for you. Alyssa asked earlier on, she said she's interested in hearing more about the balance and wanting to keep communications very positive, since we're promoting a luxury item that people are usually buying for a very positive occasion, with the fact that so many of the issues can be quite devastating to learn more about. So this balance that we're always working with of how do we raise awareness of the issues without being a total downer, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's, I think, part of the key to that is, where are you putting your communications out? If your company is doing all these hundreds of things, right, that are pure, or your business model is purely to change the environment and make an impact, sustainability wise, then your front page can reflect that with the beautiful product that we have. If it is a part of your business, but you're very proud of it, you can also put it in a different section of your website until you're at the point where it becomes sort of the whole part of your site. I also think for these businesses, it's very, very human to human interaction. The person who's looking at your website is going to want to buy from you as a person, it's not just going to be about the product. And so you can add that personality in without being overly egregious, or without using overly egregious or language. It is a tough balance, but I do have to, I do think that if we put out there exactly what we're doing, we kind of keep ourselves safe to others looking at us and making those negative comments. I hope that's what you're asking.
A bit, yeah. I think it's more so like, how do we talk about how do we tell people about some of the issues that we're trying to fix without, without it feeling like this big burden while they're coming to us for a celebratory occasion most of the time. I know there's not really like a clear answer on that,
Yeah.
but if you have any tips on.
So I'm thinking this through, and I'm just trying to think of, so I guess there's either a consumer is asking you, right? Like, so let's say there was that article in the New York Times the other day about whether or not gold is now going to be considered conflict. And we have lots of articles about the Kimberley process and failing in this area and blah, blah, blah. I would not suggest that you put this front and center on your website. But I do suggest certainly that you follow, I read voraciously every day, that you do follow these things, and then you look at your own business so that you have the answer as to, okay, well, this may be happening, but here's what I am doing to ensure that I'm limiting my effect on that. I am working towards X, Y, and Z. I am no longer, or I don't believe I have Russian gold in my inventory. And in order to ensure that, I am taking X, Y, and Z steps. I do think at this point, it is more of a reactive measure, because we do have a lot of issues that we're contending with and that we have to deal with.
I see. So you're saying, if somebody were to come to you after having read this article, then you already have that proof on your website of here's what I'm doing to to counteract that or to do it differently. That's great. Okay, so how about I guess maybe a little bit more of a practical question next. Emily and Will are asking kind of SEO related questions. And this kind of brought me back to, what you were saying about using or not using certain words, or maybe at least not overusing them. Emily, did you want to maybe unmute and ask it yourself, just so you can explain your experience? Yeah,
sure.
Cool.
Hi.
Hey.
So what I had put in the chat was about, using those buzzwords like ethical, sustainable, responsible, especially when working with SEO and hashtags, because that's, how we get in front of our customers. And, we manage to avoid those kinds of words in our digital and verbal communication, but, I don't it's very hard to balance that scale of, we want to use those words because that's what gets us in front of clients. And that's what, at the end of the day, that's what our customers search. When we ask them how they heard about us, they said, oh, I Googled ethical jeweler and you came up. Right. So how do we avoid using that language, but still getting in front of customers in that way?
It's a great question. I am, to be honest, I'm not an SEO expert, so I don't have the specifics on that. I will answer it to some degree, but I do want to just see if Shane is on here. Shane Hollander.
You can unmute Shane.
Yeah.
I think she's trying to unmute.
I'm here. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Hi.
So Shane, maybe you can just give a quick, who you are and what you do, and maybe help me out a little bit here.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm a social media and digital marketing consultant. I run a business called Straight Up Social with expertise in the jewelry industry. And I think what the points that you guys raised are great questions. I think, actually just had brunch with Brandee over coffee. We met over coffee and we were talking about this. And I think, starting out, like if you do SEO research and having the keywords in mind that you want to rank for, it's easier to start with that. And then before you start writing, or if you're rewriting something, naturally try to weave those in. But I think it's definitely important to, you want to have keywords that are relevant to your industry. So you can have, tons of people in different industries using sustainable, but maybe the keyword that you're looking to rank for is sustainable jewelry, or something like that. But just make it relevant to the industry instead of making it a super broad keyword, because you're not going to be, it's going to be very challenging for you to rank on something that's so broad. So really honing it in onto what you're doing specifically, what you're selling specifically. And, I think starting with that mission statement that you have, you want it to ladder up to that mission statement. So that would be my advice.
And I just, by the way, SEO, of course, is incredibly important. So I do understand the value of using these words in hashtags and certainly to build your SEO. But at this, I guess my point is more that at the same time, you better be doing the work. You better be there. If you're going to, use these as examples, you better know that if someone sees them and they're going to question that because is it greenwashing or is it not, because it is so prevalently used, what are your answers? What are your responses? Where can someone go to see more? So I guess it's kind of like more of a blend of making use because you have to in order to rank, but also ensuring that you have the real what to say behind it.
As Brandee was saying, I think you could even expand if you're making a statement on the homepage for people to land on your page, you could hyperlink over to a FAQ page where people can learn more, where you can really dive in to all the details of what you're offering and why, and some of those percentages that Brandee was saying, quantifying what you're doing. Anyway, that would be my advice.
And I'll be very honest, I was, as I was putting together the presentation, I was thinking more, broadly about communications, and kind of thinking about more of those, the companies that just because they think they're sustainable or responsible, they put those things out there. Whereas, I do know that this group is, walking the walk. And so those words can be useful because of the way search engine optimization works. But again, just make sure that you have what you need to back it up all the time.
Yeah, it sounds to me, Brandee, like you're saying, just because other brands might be out there just saying sustainability all over the place or saying ethical all over the place, and maybe they are doing that to greenwash, like that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use those words anymore. We just have to use them in a way that we are explaining what we mean by it, right? Even when it comes to sustainable, working with the Jewelry Glossary Project lately, we're defining it, sustainability, as these interconnecting domains of environment, culture, and economics, right? So even though, as Monica pointed out, mining gemstones or mining anything is not environmentally sustainable, it can help contribute to economic sustainability, right? So I think if we add more meaning to these terms that we're using, we can use them more without a worry. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you could take also, I'm just thinking aloud here, you could take some of those keywords and do like green, working towards limited, I don't know. I'm thinking you can be much more specific and use some of those words within those hashtags that really reflect the work that you're doing. So we are green because, or we're going toward, I don't know, it's a slippery slope.
Gotcha. Okay, we had another question in the chat. There's so many, so forgive us if we don't get to all of them. So many great questions. Can you give examples of what giving value means when communicating sustainability issues?
I'm not sure what that means by giving value.
I think you had mentioned in one of your slides that when you're communicating around sustainability issues, you want to make sure that you are giving value. So does that mean, that you're like presenting valuable information, or?
I think it's more about that typically our products have been deemed valuable based on their rarity or based on the 4 C's or something technical of that nature. What I was trying to say was let's redefine value of our products, where value comes in how they are mined, how they are sourced, how we get them, what we do with them, etc. So that's really more of what I meant, that let's redefine value in our product. That 2 months, you can only buy a diamond with 2 months salary. No, let's talk about, I want to buy a diamond because it helped with this, or because I'm giving this, or, but that kind of thing is what I meant.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Excellent. We are in the kind of wrap up phase of this wonderful conversation that we've been having today. Please, in the next few minutes, if you want to drop things into the chat for us to continue considering. We're always looking for more topics for living room sessions that directly apply to your unique interests. And I hope that this one helped a bit because we've seen questions around how to communicate, because everyone wants to sort of get it right and they're fearful about getting it wrong.
Mhm.
And that, in the way you've been explaining it, it's wrong would be being disingenuous, right? Wrong would be, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't, in the work that you are doing, that we are doing here, I wouldn't even use the term wrong, right? So there is, it's more what you're doing, be transparent about it, be truthful. And that is right versus wrong. So it's more about your actions.
Yeah. One question that I know we'll come back to in the future, and I'll just put the seed out at the moment, is communicating around really complex stories like artisanally mined gold or and artisanally mined gemstones and diamonds. Sometimes the images that people see don't necessarily communicate confidence in the product, because we see people in states of being that, to, from a Western point of view, look uncomfortable or look problematic, and really defining social benefit, really measuring social benefit is very difficult to quantify that. So that's something kind of in the future. How do you really talk about the origin of materials from those circumstances? I don't know if you have a quick thing to say about that, but.
Well, I think it ties into what you kind of last said, right? Is that is part of our reality. That is part of what we have to deal with within our supply chains. Not luckily, but I'm thrilled that we have folks like you guys who are fighting the good fight for those people, or to make our supply chains better, or to help people on the ground that mine our products. We can't, though, ignore that it does happen. So what we can offer a consumer is not only our own work that we're doing, but also the work that others are doing. So perhaps we could talk more about the larger industry taking action as well. And that your company and the industry is not stepping back. Again, it goes back to that we have this product that is really easy to walk away from because it is a product that's been marketed as what it is. And so how do we find that balance between that love and emotion that we've created around it with this reality behind it? So again, I think the best answers are the actions that you're taking and talking about those actions. Because I want to buy from you particularly if I know that you're fighting the good fight. I may not want to buy from your friend down the block, though, if he's not going to tell me about it. But yes, it's an ongoing, really difficult issue. And quite frankly, we can do what we can, but we are a very large supply chain and we need others in that supply chain to do their work too.
Thanks. Alyssa, I appreciate the comment that you just dropped in the chat because it is sort of the summary. It's one of the high points. If we review what we covered today, one of the big points that you made, Brandee, was really trying to understand what your customers and your audience are most interested in and most interested in supporting. Mm-hmm. There's value to educating them along the way because they might not know that they could support XYZ initiative by buying your jewelry. So it is a balance between the education and then really identifying what they want. You also covered really some of the traditional and useful categories of communications and their characteristics, like being very deliberate, being sort of providing your expertise and knowledge, not using words that are jargony, making sure it's audience focused, and encourage a conversation between yourself and your customer. You were also talking about things that you can use, like making sure you develop a broad strategy. Included in that is your mission and how you report back to that mission, check in with it. Is it on par? How do you use it in your language? Choosing where you communicate about this on your website and on your social media and so on. And how the various ways that you can get the word out through public relations by sort of relying on industry publications, consumer facing publications as a way, as other ways to tell your stories. You talked about certifications. Some might be a good fit. Some might not be a good fit. What do they help you do? What don't they help you do? One of the notes that you ended on was, use the people that are close around you to mirror back to you what they feel your business is trying to sell and what its identity is all about. And that's a really good exercise to really figure out what you're all about. So Brandee, we want to thank you. You have a last word. I can see it.
No, I in the chat, there's this conversation, which is so interesting. And I'd love for all of us to discuss it a little further about, are we activists or are we jewelers, or what's the difference? If we combine the two, what does that look like? And I think that's a greater question about who we are. And then we could talk about how we communicate about it. But this is a totally new, right? It's the activist jeweler is a totally new area. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Another living.
I didn't want the last word.
Yes. Thank you, Brandee. We really appreciate the preparation and the time and effort that you put into preparing this for us. Really grateful, wonderful job. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next living room session on September 16th. And in the meantime, make sure you're on our mailing list so you get some information about our upcoming course.
Thank you all.
guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Brandee.
you.
Have a
See you
great
later,
weekend.
guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Thank you, Brandon.
Bye. Go and be great.